What's going on, YouTube? Welcome back to Fireside Rangers. I'm your host, Eric Wilson. Today, joined by my co-hosts, Colin Alcabes and Will Cohen. Today, we're going to be discussing last night's embarrassing defeat against the Columbus Blue Jackets. It's a game that the Rangers should have entered and won with relative ease, like they did against Buffalo. But instead, the Rangers did take their first loss of the season. We knew it would happen at some point, but we didn't expect it to be last night. So before we get into things, make sure everyone likes, subscribes, ring that bell so you don't miss a notification. Leave your thoughts on last night's game down in the comment section below, and be sure to follow all of our social media platforms at Fireside Rangers on both X and Instagram. So before we really get into the deep talk about this game, Colin, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I could be a little bit better. It's a tough defeat, but I think they'll bounce back. I'm not too worried, but obviously we got some talking points of what they could do better and what their downfall was last night.
Yeah, there's a lot of downfalls there. And Will, I know you are sick and you weren't able to watch the entire game, but from what you saw, what were your thoughts on it, and how are you feeling about it?
I thought the first period looked good. I thought the Panarin Heedle Lafreniere line looked good again in the first period. I can't say anything about the second and third, but they had a really good passing play that led to a Heedle goal that was disallowed because Lafreniere was slightly offsides, and then I know Panarin had another. He had a high danger chance. He had a little spinorama off a sick backhand feed from Lafreniere. That was really I just went crazy about, but. I thought they looked good that period. There could have been some other things that went differently. I know Schneider could have played a lot better, but I thought they looked good nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean, the first period was the only time of the game where the Rangers looked good. The only problem is leaving that first period, the Rangers realistically should have been up 3-0. There were two goals called back. I believe it was Philip Hedel and Zibanejad who scored the two, and offsides both times called back. Then the next thing you know, the Rangers are leaving the first period down 2-1, which then snowballed into a massive deficit that we weren't able to come back from. So, Colin, those plays that went offsides were like, did the refs like make a mistake? Was it the right call? Like, how did you feel about those plays, and how do you think that those goals getting called back impacted the Rangers?
I think at the end of the day, the refs did make the right call, as much as I hate to say, because I love seeing the Rangers score. But I think I'd rather have consistent refs, and they were consistently right just after the fact, unfortunately. But Lafreniere was definitely offsides, and the play before also was offsides, and they got the goal being called back correct as well with that Trouba save, which was fantastic. But I think it does a lot to your confidence. I think you come out guns a-blazing, like we talked about, trying to get the start that you want, and then you get two goals taken back. I think it's going to do a tremendous amount on a team's confidence. And from there on out, I mean, they just looked like they were chasing to get back to whatever energy they had in that second period. They were pretty weak in the beginning. They picked it up towards the end, and then it was the same Rangers of last year, where the third they kind of came on strong towards the end, but it was too little, too late. And I think it does irreparable damage to the game when you get two goals that are going to be called back, and unfortunately, it wasn't enough for them to surmount that comeback.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a game changer. I think the momentum would have been entirely different had the Rangers scored 3 goals in that first period. That would have left us with 5 goals by the end of the game, and I don't think Columbus would have had the energy to really just make that huge surge of goal scoring that they did. Because the first period the Rangers were beating Merzlikins. I think he was the Columbus goalie, right, Colin?
Yeah, he started and halfway through the third, or a little bit into the third, he left with an apparent injury, and somebody else filled in.
Yeah, but we were able to beat him 3 times in the first period, even if only one of them counted. But then after that, he really just became a brick wall that was really hard to beat. But one thing that you did bring up from the first period was that incredible Trouba save. Now, Will, you were able to see that part of the game. I know we talked about it a little bit before we hit record, but just break down that play for us and how incredible of a save that was.
I mean, I think Trouba was behind the net, and it trickled through Shesterkin's his pads, and Trouba just made a beautiful dive at the last second. Like, I think 75% of the puck was in the back, was across the line, and he just made a beautiful save. And I'm a little shocked that they called it a goal in live time, because they obviously missed the two. They missed the two offsides in real time, which, I mean, it's kind of hard, but it was pretty obvious that it wasn't a goal, even when in live time when I was watching it. I know a lot of other Ranger fans on Twitter said the exact same things. but it was a beautiful save, and honestly, he could be up there for save of the year at the end of the year.
Yeah, I mean, it was an amazing save. I know I've been seeing it all over social media, and for some reason, a lot of like people online just keep commenting like, "Why are you posting a good goal?" Like, I don't know where the confusion is. There was one camera angle that it looked like it might have potentially gone in, but then every other camera angle was just. It was so clear that it wasn't in, and it was a great save by Trouba. I did make a joke last night, and I was like, "Trouba just got goal of the year. Give him the Vezina right now." But I don't know. I think like we pretty much covered everything that went right. It was just the first period and that one save. So I think it's really time that we should get into the nitty gritty of things and discuss what went wrong, why this was such an embarrassing defeat. And I think the first thing that I want to bring up is just the fact that the Rangers were just completely outplayed physically. They were able to excel in their season opener against Buffalo because they weren't matched with any sort of level of physicality. But the second that they played up against a team who was willing to match them like Columbus, everything just came falling apart. Last season there was a huge problem where the Rangers they were making too pretty of plays, trying to be too fancy with the puck. And it really just got exposed in the playoffs, which led to their very early elimination. And then it looks like Laviolette had come in as a new head coach, had very long, hard-fought practices, and it looked like there was being progress made. But as of last night, we kind of proved that everything still can fall apart if the Rangers don't play at their hardest. They were out-hit 12-9 by Columbus. They were out-blocked 27-12 by Columbus. The only positive stat line that I'm looking at is that they outshot Columbus 42-21. You put up that many shots and only score so many goals and only allow that many shots against and let in as many goals as they did, that's a problem. So Collin, just from like a level of like effort, physicality, skating, how did you feel about the Rangers? Because clearly it wasn't the best.
I mean, looking at it, it's definitely disappointing. I think obviously there's a lot of hockey left. It's 82 game season, so we can't be extremely critical, but I think that there was some definite problems with their battles. I know there was a couple plays where, and I'm not trying to be harsh on Lafreniere, but he got beat along the boards and was making lazy plays, and it was seeming that everybody was reaching and just trying to chip as opposed to stopping on the puck, following through on their checks, making plays. And it's the opposite of the Buffalo game. We're on the other side of that now, where we're getting all of our shots, 27 shots blocked. That's a lot of shots. We were saying I think the Rangers had 23 against the Sabres, and it was great. But they did just that for their team. I think a lot of it boils down to missing Lindgren. I saw a stat, I believe you sent it earlier, that the Rangers record, I don't have the exact numbers, but it is significantly better when he is in the lineup as opposed to when he's out. And I think that the play of Zach Jones didn't fill the need that was necessary. He's just undersized, and the reason that we were getting beat so much is deflections. I mean, Boone Jenner had 2 deflections, and then they were just getting outmanned, outbodied. And I think it's just because of Zach Jones and how undersized he is. He wasn't able to win those net front battles, which allowed Boone Jenner to set up shop and do what he does best and tip that puck in for his, I think it was his first hat trick in the last 4, or his second hat trick in the last 4 years. So it's tough.
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to bring up Ryan Lindgren again a little bit later, but just to clarify that stat you brought up, I saw it from Vince Mercogliano. After last night's loss, the Rangers now have a record of 47, 52, and 17. So not very good when they're playing without Lindgren. And they have a record of 149, 82, and 57 when he does play. So there's a huge difference right there between how the Rangers perform with Lindgren and without Lindgren. But more on that in a little bit. Will, I just want to bring up a stat for you, because even though you weren't able to watch the entire game, the second line of Panarin, Hedl, and Lafreniere did not play well. Panarin and Lafreniere were both -2. I know Collin kind of mentioned a couple of poor plays from Lafreniere, and then Hedl was a -3. So, I believe Panarin did end up having an assist last night, but just overall, that line did not look good. So it is one game, but how do you feel about that line? Are you going to be wanting to maybe make a change for tomorrow night against Arizona, or are you just going to let it ride and hope that it gets better?
I'm not gonna substitute anyone off that line. Not gonna change it at all. I mean, there will be games when you have where a line will play good, a line will play bad. I mean, obviously the first game they looked really good. They were the best line on the Rangers. And yesterday, obviously, they were combined for what was it? I think -7, if I'm doing the math correctly. It was just not. Sometimes I think maybe when the Rangers get down, I know Panarin does this. He tries to get too fancy and do a little too much, which kind of throws him off his game. He's said that numerous times. And I think the same thing happens to Lafreniere. I mean, obviously, when they were up against Buffalo, he had a lot of swagger, and he probably just lost all that swagger once they went down. They were trying to do too much. And obviously, we know the Rangers, when they do too much, it's not good at all. You want them to be simple. So I wouldn't change anything on that line. I would ride it out. You can't go putting the lines in a blender after 2 games. You got to let it ride out for maybe about a week or 2.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right there, especially because of how well they played in game 1. We were very high on Lafreniere after he scored that first goal of the season and made a couple of great plays against Buffalo. But just because he looked terrible last night, it's hard to make that sort of assessment, especially when the entire team is looking terrible along with them. But here's another thing I want to bring up, Collin. We might disagree on this just based on a couple of things we talked about last night during the game, but I'm not sure. There was a point when you texted me like Igor needs to make that save on one of the goals that Columbus scored. But just going back and looking at all the goals that the Blue Jackets did score against us, I don't really know how many of them you can blame on Igor. I know he was screened a lot of times. He faced a lot of odd man rushes. There were a lot of 2-on-1s last night. Way too many. I know Laviolette does have a quote on it. I'll read really quick before I finish this. There were some odd man rushes that I didn't like and some things that snuck back in there that you've got to take out. It wasn't overwhelming amounts of them, but the ones that we didn't take charge of, they came back the other way and bit us. So a lot of bad play in front of Shesterkin. Collin, I'm curious on how you thought he played just based on that information.
I thought he played well. It was really only the one goal. It was a shot. The lane was clear, and he got beat on the on his blocker side, I believe, or maybe it was his glove side. My apologies. But I thought he played well overall. I think again, it's because of the net front battles. There's a lot of 2-on-1s, 2-on-0s. I know there was a bad play by Panarin where he tried to pinch and ended up being a 2-on-0. And when you're getting those looks, even if you're not getting a lot of them, if you're cashing in on all of them, it's going to be tough, and you got to try and limit those. And it was just unfortunate that there wasn't a lot of defensive help for him in clearing out the net front and allowing him the best chances to make most of those saves. I was really only referencing the one goal. I believe it was the fourth one, was one that I thought that he would want to have back. But everything else was pretty much out of his control, and he played to the best of his abilities, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I always have a hard time finding blame against goaltenders because, they play their best. Igor Shesterkin, obviously, we're never going to hate on him, even if he has a little bit of a subpar game. But the defense really did not give him any help. He had 5 goals against. I'm trying to do the math really quickly. I think he had a save percentage of .809, which is nowhere near his regular standards. But then kind of back to circle around the Ryan Lindgren thing again, Will. I've read the statistic about how different the Rangers play with him and without him. I think it was seen again, just the impact that he could have had. I think it would have been an entirely different game had Lindgren played, but instead it looks like that hand injury that he's been dealing with since that block shot against Buffalo is still lingering a little bit. So what are your thoughts on Lindgren, what he contributes to the team, and how important is it that he gets back on the ice as quickly as possible?
I'm going to go off what Collin said a couple of minutes ago with Zach Jones. I think when Lindgren comes out of the lineup, you're going to have Zach Jones with Schneider, and Schneider's not really the type of guy that is really good with the net front presence kind of stuff, and Zach Jones obviously is small. I think he's 5'10", 5'11". So obviously if you have Lindgren on the top pair, and then you have Gustafsson down the third pair, and then Miller and Trouba, obviously. But Gustafsson's more like he's that bigger guy. He's going to clear the lane for Igor. Lindgren's going to clear the lane for Igor. So I think it kind of, when he doesn't play, the defensive pairings just aren't as good because obviously you have a smaller guy coming in and playing with Schneider. So it's a little tough with the net front presence kind of thing. But I also think that Adam Fox plays his best with Lindgren because obviously he's a really good defenseman, but he kind of tends to focus more when he doesn't have Lindgren. I noticed this. He's kind of doing more than he needs to with filling in Lindgren's shoes. So he's not stepping up as much. He's staying back. It kind of hinders his offensive game. So I think you can definitely notice that that Fox plays a little different without Lindgren, but I think for the overall part of the team defense, he makes it a lot better. And obviously that stat backs it up with 149 wins with him, and probably, I think it was, if I remember correctly, it was like 42 wins without him.
Yeah, it was something along those lines. It was a negative record. Point is, they lost more games than they won without Lindgren on on the ice. But yeah, there were definitely a lot of things that went wrong. Lindgren is a huge piece. I think he's one of the most underrated players on the Rangers. I did write an article about that today on EmpireSportsMedia.com. So for more info on that, feel free to check that out. But before we wrap things up, it was a terrible game. It was embarrassing. There's no way to just skate around that. It was bad, but obviously we're not going to be hitting the panic button just yet because we're only 2 games into the season. We're hopefully looking for a bounce back against Arizona in our home opener tomorrow night. But just before I want to end it on a good note. And I think, in my opinion, Chris Kreider was the best looking Ranger last night. He had another goal. He currently leads the Rangers with 4 points in 2 games, 3 goals. So I'm very hopeful for him. I think we can definitely dedicate an entire episode to this. But Collin, just what are your thoughts on Kreider so far this season? What are your expectations for him, and how impressed have you been by him?
I mean, Kreider's Kreider. We know what he is. We know what we're going to get with him, and he's always very good. He's packed up a little bit more of those consistency issues and gotten rid of them. I used to say he was the most consistently inconsistent player on the Rangers, and where when he was hot, he would be like potting goals like it was nothing. Looked like he's going to run away with the Maurice Rocket Richard, and then he'd get ice cold, and you'd be like, "Is Kreider even out there? Is he hurt? Where is he?" And I like to compare him a lot to Didi Gregorius of the Yankees back when he was on the Yankees, where when he was hot, when he was not, he's not. But I think he's done a lot better at being more consistent and being a force out there every single night, especially since we gave him that new deal. I know when we signed him to the contract that he's on currently, I was concerned for it because he had never put up over 30 goals, and he had the ability to do so, and he just never, ever did it. But now he's consistently doing it, and he's looking like a star player. And we went over a little bit the last episode. He leads the league in shorthanded goals since, I think, 2019, 2020. He leads the league in tip goals since 2019, 2020. And I think surrounding him with a lot more talent has made him a better player. But I also think that he's just risen to the occasion and stepped into that leadership role as the longest tenured Ranger. And as he's watched people come and go through the revolving door and through rebuilds and whatnot, he's seen a lot and learned a lot and been able to use it all to his advantage and step up.
You are absolutely right there, Collin. I know we're only 2 games into the season, but just based on what I've seen so far, if I'm going to make a way too early prediction of the Rangers MVP, Kreider is far and away number 1 for me right now. But Will, I know we weren't able to watch deep enough into the game to see that Kreider goal. So just for the last thing we'll discuss for today, something that you did see, Erik Gustafsson did score his first goal as a New York Ranger. So just through 2 games, a good game and a bad game, what are your opinions on him so far? Do you think he's fitting in nicely, or does he need a little bit more adjustment time?
I think he fits in really well with the Rangers. It's nice to have 3 offensive defensemen in the D pairs now with Gustafsson. I mean, he had 42 points last year, 60, I think 2 or 3 seasons ago with the Blackhawks, and I think he makes Schneider a lot better. Obviously, we saw Schneider and Jones last night, and it wasn't very pretty, but I think he's very good. He can slot up and down the lineup because of his ability, and he can also QB the power play too if they ever need it. So I think obviously there was a good and bad game, but I think as the season progresses, we're going to see a lot of positives out of him. Plus, I think we only signed him for $825,000. So I think he'll get an extension with the Rangers, but I think he's going to exceed the amount of money he makes with his play.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very impressed with him so far as well. Hoping for a great season out of Kreider, Gustafsson, and the entirety of the Rangers team, because we do need to have a bounce back game tomorrow night against Arizona. But until then, this pretty much wraps up this episode. So we will be sure to cover tomorrow's home opener against the Coyotes. We might do a live stream beforehand. We might not. I'm not sure yet. But definitely some content will be out tomorrow. So until then, make sure you like, subscribe, ring that bell so you don't miss a notification. Once again, leave your thoughts on last night's game in the comments below, and maybe even some comments about what you're looking forward to most tomorrow night. Make sure to follow all of our social media accounts at Fireside Rangers on both X and Instagram. And until tomorrow, have a great night and
Let's go Rangers.